Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Giri Baradani Jaya Gopi Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Jaya Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Dari Baba Jaya Yamuna Tira Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare. The Prabhupada. Devaya. It's a good Mridanga. It's a good one. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayed Nasta Prayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Om Agyana Tamirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangum Langayate Gurum Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. If you turn the TV on, I can do everything else. Well, I guess if you turn it on and make the source. Okay. Reading from the Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 25, the Glories, Service. Text number 17. Text number Canto 3, Chapter 25. Text 17. Tada Purusha Atmanam Kevalam Prakrite Param Nirantaram Swayam Jyotir Animanam Akhanditam Tada Purusha Atmanam Kevalam Prakrite Param Nirantaram Swayam Jyotir Animanam Akhanditam Tada Purusha Atmanam Kevalam Prakrite Param Nirantaram Swayam Jyotir Animanam Akhanditam. Tada Purusha Atmanam Please, everybody. Punya Shravana Kirtana. Everyone can chant. Tada, then. Purusha, the individual soul. Atmanam, himself. Kevalam, pure. Prakrite param, transcendental to the material existence. Nirantaram, non-different. Swayam jyotihi, self-effulgent. Animanam, infinitesimal. Akhanditam, not fragmented. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. It's more enthusiastic for the person who's giving the class if people are sitting closer. They're sitting farther away, especially on the chairs in the back. It's like they're not paying attention at all and they might as well be somewhere else. Also, if we could have the left side be for the Matajis and the right side be for everyone else. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. Please repeat. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. Purport. In the state of pure consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, one can see himself as a minute particle, non-different from the Supreme Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the jiva, or the individual soul, is eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Just as the sun's rays are minute particles of the brilliant constitution of the sun, so a living entity is a minute particle of the Supreme Spirit. The individual soul and the Supreme Lord are not separated as in material differentiation. The individual soul is a particle from the very beginning. One should not think that because the individual soul is a particle, it is fragmented from the whole spirit. Mayavad philosophy enunciates that the whole spirit exists, but a part of it, which is called jiva, is entrapped by illusion. This philosophy, however, is unacceptable because spirit cannot be divided like a fragment of matter. That part, the jiva, is eternally a part. As long as the Supreme Spirit exists, his part and parcel also exists. As long as the sun exists, the molecules of the sun's rays also exists. The jiva particle is estimated in Vedic literature to be 1/10,000th of the size of the upper portion of the hair. It is therefore infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is infinite, but the living entity or the individual soul is infinitesimal, although it is not different in quality from the Supreme Spirit. Two words in this verse are to be particularly noted. One is nirantaram, which means non-different or same quality, or of the same quality. The individual soul is also expressed here as animanam. Animanam means infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is all-pervading, but the very small spirit is the individual soul. Akhanditam means not exactly fragmented, but constitutionally always infinitesimal. No one can separate the molecular parts of the sunshine from the sun, but at the same time, the molecular part of the sunshine is not as expansive as the sun itself. Similarly, the living entity by its constitutional position is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Spirit, but he is infinitesimal. So before I say anything, I would just like to acknowledge Maharaj and ask for his blessings to say something, and Snan Govinda, other senior devotees here. So at that, Tada Purusha Atmanam Kevalam Prakrite Param Nirantaram Swayam Jyotir Animanam Makanditam. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. So we're here, Kapil Dev has just started speaking. He's about to give some mind-blowing information that's unobtainable anywhere else. That's why he had to come down and give it. We're seeing at that time. So what time? If you remember yesterday, which generally in Kali Yuga our memories are pretty bad. We probably don't even remember what we ate yesterday, what to speak of what was being said. But if we remember exactly what was being said, because we're all Shrutidars, we would remember that yesterday's verse was talking about when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed, produced from the false identification of the body as I, and the body's possessions as mine, from Arjuna Nanda's nice class, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. So when you get beyond the ego, aham, I, and mama, mamata, that which is mine, that which belongs to me, that's the false ego. And then when you transcend that, because you cleansed the impurities of lust and greed, then real knowledge comes. When you clear out the Rajaguna, come to the level of Sattva-guna, then you can see reality and you can transcend to Shuddha Sattva. And in that level, at that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. And in the purport, Prabhupada saying, in the state of pure consciousness, one can see himself as a minute particle non-different from the Supreme Lord. To be honest, this sentence was a little bewildering to me. At least my understanding is, as someone becomes more Krishna conscious, they realize themselves more than just a minute particle. They realize their spiritual form. I guess by realizing that, you also realize that minute particleness of your being, as it says later in this purport, constitutionally always infinitesimal, which would imply that you never think that you're greater than the Lord, at least in terms of tattva. Maybe with rasa, the cowherd boys wanted to play with the Lord. I can beat you in wrestling. Like, oh, I beat you in the race. Now you have to, let me climb on your back, or something like that. There may be some sort of rasik level of understanding that Krishna is maybe seeming lower than them, but they'll never think like a Mayavadi would think, oh, this is all just illusion, and when I overcome this illusion, then because I'm not different from the Lord, I should be equal to the Lord or greater. But if we become in pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, getting rid of this false ego that I want to be greater than the Lord or equal to the Lord, actually at that point, we can be greater than the Lord through, like I was saying, through rasa, through prema. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the jiva, or the individual soul, is eternally part and parcel of the Lord. Okay, which verse is it? Which chapter? Is anyone? Oh, he got it. Do you know what chapter that is? Don't. Okay, 15. Yeah. Maybe we can all say it together. That's Prabhupada saying. Krishna says, what is it? As stated in Bhagavad Gita. So, Mama vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasastrendrinjani prakriti stani karshati. So, Mama, my vamso, my parts are the jiva. They're eternally my parts. So this is another. Krishna attacks the Mayavad philosophy multiple times in Bhagavad Gita, and this is a good verse. because the Mayavadis say that we're not eternally the part and parcel of Krishna, but that when we fully are realized, that difference dissolves and we become, non-different. But Krishna is saying here, no, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, they're my parts eternally. And like Kapila Dev was saying in the verse before, you have to purify yourself of lust and greed. And Krishna is saying here, Mana Sashtindriyani, the six senses which include the mind, Prakriti Stani Karshati, he's struggling hard against them. So that's either, if we decide to go by their dictation, we're going to struggle. If you decide to do whatever your mind wants you to do, your mind is your worst enemy in the conditioned stage. So if you decide to go with it, then you're going to struggle a lot. Like Krishna says, there's no more greater pain and suffering than following the demands of lust. So whatever your mind says, it's just going to be some faulty, false ego, lusty desire, and however your intelligence chooses to try to obtain that, you'll try to do that, but ultimately it won't work. It may work temporarily. Like, you can enjoy some of the things some of the time, but you can never, but you can't enjoy all the things all the time. But the mind wants to enjoy all the things all the time, because he wants to be, the mind, the false ego, we want to be God. So God, Krishna actually enjoys all the things all the time, and we want that. But like Prabhupada was saying, because we're infinitesimal, akanditam means constitutionally always infinitesimal, we can't enjoy all the things all the time. We can certainly enjoy a lot, and actually real enjoyment, real bliss, Kevala Ananda Kanda, is the Bhakti Kanda, is doing devotional service, because then we're actually empowered by the Lord, by serving the Lord and connecting ourselves with the Lord, we're empowered by the Lord's blissful energy, the Hladini Shakti. Like it said that, oh Lord, I want to serve you, I don't want anything as my payment besides just the bliss of serving you more. Famous verse. And so, just as the sun's rays are a minute particle of the brilliant constitution of the sun, a living entity is a minute particle of the Supreme Spirit. The individual soul and the Supreme Lord are not separated as in material differentiation. So this sun example is used so much. Like with Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Adhikar. Anyone know the rest of that shloka from CC? Krishna is the same as the sun. Brajman, spit it. And like the darkness can't be around the sun. Similarly, Maya, because Maya is considered the shadow of Krishna, can never be directly with Krishna. And so Krishna is like the sun. One thing I remember reading in the Gayatri handbook from Sachinanda Maharaj is that if you're not sure which way east is, but the deities are there, because Krishna is not different from the sun, you're supposed to face the east when you chant your Gayatri, but you can actually face the deities because they're not different than the sun. So that's nice. But this analogy is a little different. The sun's rays are minute particles of the brilliant constitution of the sun. So a living entity is a minute particle of the Supreme Spirit. And they're not separated as a material differentiation. Like we have Yashoda Dulal was saying some funny example. He had found some devotee that he was visiting that had a piece of Prabhupada's dhoti. And he was thinking, oh, I would like some of that. And the guy's like, oh, it's my prized possession. How could I ever, give this to you? And then he had an idea, oh, well, if you tear it in half, then you give me some, and you keep all the mercy, but I also get, and I promise I'll take it, and I'll tear it in half, and I'll give it to someone else. So therefore, two people, more get the mercy. So that's like material things. There's a whole, and you break it up, and it becomes two halves. You break that up, and it becomes 4 quarters. So on and so forth, or you can tear it 60-40 or whatever it is. But that's not how math works spiritually. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. 1 plus 1 equals 1. 1 minus 1 equals 1. And if you take infinity away from 1, it still remains 1. So there's and you add infinity to 1 and it still remains 1. That's how this transcendental math went. So 1, take away 1. If Krishna can produce a fragment of himself, a part and parcel, but it doesn't take anything away from him, and that part and parcel is perfectly equipped as a complete whole, like this planet. Prabhupada says it's like a gigantic spaceship, but that's perfectly engineered to have everything that you need for life. There's not, you don't need to go to some other planet. I mean, now they're saying we need to go to Mars and the other planets because we're destroying it, but it's originally created as a proper spaceship to bring us through space and time to fulfill our materialistic, lusty desires in order to purify ourselves from them, so we can actually realize that we're beyond this body and that we're an infinitesimal part and parcel of Krishna, like a minute particle of the sun. And Prabhupada gives a funny example. Like if we had windows here, there's supposedly windows behind this facade. If we had windows, maybe we'd see the ray of sun come in here. And Sanatan Prabhu may say, oh, look at, nicely the sun has come. Just see the sun is in the room now. And if someone was a literalist, taking his words exactly verbatim, they might start to scream and try to run away, because if the physical sun was in here, the temperature of the sun is like, I don't know exactly how hot, any nerds in here might remember that number, but it's hot enough that we would all be vaporized pretty much. So if the actual sun was in here, it would be vaporized. But you still say, when the ray of sun is in here, the sun is here. That's because the ray of the sun is not different from the sun. But because it's infinitesimal, it has the same quality of the sun, but it doesn't burn us like as if the sun was right here. So one should not think that because the individual soul is a particle, it is fragmented from the whole spirit, is a particle from the very beginning. So Krishna has made us, but he's also still connected with us. It's not like you rip those two pieces of cloth and then that's it. They're separated forever. Mayavad philosophy enunciates that the whole spirit exists, but a part of it, which is called the jiva, is entrapped by illusion. This philosophy, however, is unacceptable because spirit cannot be divided like a fragment of matter. So there's other, like chapter 2 is a great chapter with many shlokas talking about the soul. So how can the soul be divided? One of the first verses Krishna speaks after Arjuna properly surrenders to him. Na tvevaham jatu nasham, na tvam neme janadipaha, na chaiva na bhavishamaha, sarve vayam ataparam. That the soul, like me, Krishna pointing me, you, and all these kings, never was there a time in the past, nor will there a time in the future where we're not different. Like he's saying, there's been me, you, and everyone else have been different. It's not like, Krishna could have said, if the Mayavadi philosophy was right, the shloka should have gone something like, me, you, and all of these people, in the past we were all one, now we're all different, and in the future you all merge into me again. But he says, no, eternally, that we're all separate. And this is just how it is. And then he says a few shlokas, but one good one. Na jayate mrite vakarachin. The soul has no birth, like Prabhupada's saying. It's just from the beginning we were like that. There's no, it's all anadi. It's a beginningless. The soul has been a fragmented part and parcel of the Lord. Mriyate, the soul never dies, so that's good. Everyone that's scared of death, when they come closer to realizing that they're actually a soul and not their body. Because at the time of death, why are we scared at the time of death? Because we're going to lose all our stuff. We work so hard to gain all our stuff, and we don't know what's going to happen, so we have fear. But the more we realize that we're the soul, you can see so many devotees, when they pass away, they're not scared. Kanama Kanana Maharaj, with Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, you see the video, he's, I'm not scared of dying. Because he practiced his whole life. So that's, if you understand the jayate mriyate, the soul doesn't get born or doesn't die, then it's very easy. And Naya Budva Bhavita Vanabuyaha, the soul, it wasn't created, it didn't come into being sometime in the past. It's not just arriving right now in the present, and in the future, it's not like some other souls are just going to be made. Ajo, it's unborn. Nitya, eternal. Shashvato,
eternally existing.
It's always existing. Yam Purano, it's the oldest. It's because if it's always been there. And these are all this like nice, like all these Sanskrit words are like signs pointing at the soul, and they're all giving you an indication, and they're all kind of like similar, like something being unborn and eternal and always existing and the oldest. That all like they're all like very similar words. And nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Sharire, this body, when this body is slain or killed, then it doesn't matter. The soul is not killed when that body is killed. You know, Krishna also says the body can be chopped to pieces, but the soul cannot be cut by weapons. So there's no actual, like, we're separate part and parcels of Krishna, but there's no like that we're part and parcel. We're not like a completely separated part of Krishna. We're eternally connected with him. So this is the philosophy of Achintya Beta Tattva, whereas we would say that Mayavadis, they too much enunciate the non-difference and think that's like the base reality, when really it's both in a kind of achintya or inconceivable way. As long as the Supreme Spirit exists, its part and parcel also exist. As long as the sun exists, the molecules of the sun's rays also exist. The jiva particle is estimated in Vedic literature to be 1/10,000th of the size of the upper portion of the hair. It is therefore infinitesimal. So I like numbers, so I crunched the numbers I was like searching on different like chemistry things, and how many, like if you just take the layer of molecules on the top of your hair, like one layer of hair, they say it's about 10,000 carbon atoms wide. Or no, I think 100,000 carbon atoms wide. So the soul, if you were to measure it with a measuring stick, not that you could really do that, but the Vedas are telling us it's 10,000 times smaller than that. So in other words, 10 carbon atoms wide, or it's not clear on the actual, because actually the spirit doesn't have material dimension to it. Even if you could get a microscope, I mean, they have electron microscopes where the way they get the images, they shoot electrons, and just a ton of them, and some of them bounce back, and then because they're shooting individual electrons, they can get a very focused picture, so you can see molecules and atoms in a kind of way, and how they use that, but if you try to use an electron microscope with the soul, first of all, how are you going to hold the soul in place? Second of all, because there's nothing that can touch the soul. The soul is completely beyond matter. What is the electron going to bounce off of? There's no material for the electron to bounce off of, so you can't really measure it. But we can understand by the example given by the Vedas that it's extremely small. But even Krishna, in the Brahma Samhita, he mentions, Eko pyasiso rachitum jagadanda kotim yachchaktirasti jagadanda chayandayantaha antastara paramanu chayantarastam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. That he's not only the biggest, he's creating all the universes from his plenary portion. All the universes are just coming out of Mahavishnu. So every universe is like not even like a strand of arm hair for Mahavishnu. And our universe is one of the smallest universes. There's, they say that we have a four-headed Brahma, but there's universes with 8, 16, 32, 16 million, unconceivable number of heads. And according to the number of heads they have, that's the complexity and size of that universe. And so Krishna is bigger than the biggest, even the biggest. We can't conceive the size of very many things, even conceiving the size of like the state of New York or like the Earth or the solar system. It becomes more and more inconceivable as the levels get more. We can hardly conceive that. But all the universes combined are nothing compared to the size of a plenary portion of the Lord. So he's bigger than the biggest, but then antantarasta paramanu chayantarastam, that, say those 10 carbon atoms, that is the size of the soul. He's even smaller than that, because he's within the soul as the super soul. He's within every atom as something giving potency to that atom in its existence and supporting it. And so the Lord is within and without, the most. The Supreme Spirit is infinite, but the living entity or individual soul is infinitesimal, although it is not different in quality from the Supreme Spirit. So we're actually spirit, and what does spirit really need? The spirit really needs love. So the main relationship between the spirit, the infinitesimal spirit, and the Supreme Spirit is an exchange of love. Two words are in this verse are to be particularly noted: nirantaram, non-different or the same quality. Prabhupada often says, like, you take a drop of seawater, you taste that. You taste the salt and all the chemicals that are in that. That's going to be the same as, the ocean of water. You can tell something about the ocean just by taking a drop. So that's like us, if we're like a drop of water. But then the ocean also can carry fishes. A drop of water can't carry fish. So that's the difference between something that's infinitesimal and the same quality as something infinite, but not the same quantity. Whereas Krishna is infinite. Like Krishna says in chapter 13, he says, he's in the beginning, he's saying, okay, there's the field, which is the body, and the knower of the field, which is like Ryan. If I slap him in the face, he'll feel it in his body, but I won't feel it in my body. And Sanatan Govinda won't feel it in his body. But Krishna is feeling what's going on in everybody. He's the knower of all the bodies. So that's the difference between infinitesimal and infinite. Whereas we're just aware of what's going on in our body. He's aware of what's going on in the entire universe. And amaninam, animanam, not amaninam. Amaninam is means humility or something like that. Trinadapi sunichana taroivasishna amaninam manadenam kirtaniya sadhari. No, animanam, there's a anima, siddhi, when you become smaller than the smallest, and then you, if I'm running from the cops, then I just become smaller than the smallest, and I just jump through the door. Or if I can't jump through the door, I become even smaller and just walk through the atoms, or something like that. And then you could be really sneaky. But so the individual soul is infinitesimal. So that's why you can perform anima siddhi if you ultimately know how to make your body do that, because the soul is already like that. It easily can become anima siddhi. The Supreme Spirit is all-pervading, but the very small spirit is the individual soul. Akhanditam means not exactly fragmented, but constitutionally always infinitesimal. We have said that already a couple times. Because you can't fragment spirit, as Prabhupada's mentioning. No one can separate the molecular parts of the sunshine from the sun, but at the same time, the molecular part of the sunshine is not expansive as the sun itself. Similarly, the living entity, by its constitutional position, is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Spirit, but he is infinitesimal. So the most amazing thing about this infinite to infinitesimal relationship is that through love, that the infinitesimal can control the infinite. So that's why it's said in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that bhakti is sudurlabha, very rare, because Krishna doesn't want to give up his independence to any rascal that just chants a little bit or something. He really wants to make sure. So therefore, it's very rare, sudurlabha. And so, tada purusha atmanam kevalam prakrite param nirantara swayam jyotir animanam akhanditam. Now, we would like to hear from you all for a little bit. Maybe first, if Maharaj or Ramray Prabhu have something to say, and then from anyone else. And Bhaktaraya is quickly getting the wireless microphone, so our online audience, which is usually bigger than our in-class audience can also hear what's going on. You got to hold it for a little longer to turn it on.
Hare Krishna.
So maybe see if Maharaj or Ramrai Prabhu wants to say something. Ramrai Prabhu, do you have anything specific you want to say? You'd like to hear more. Okay, all right. Ryan, this way. We have Sanan and we have Bhakta Zaid. Yeah, Sanan Govinda Prabhu.
Thank you for a very nice class, Prabhu. I like the point that you made that even though the living entity is such an infinitesimal, but it can control the Supreme. It's inconceivable. Like Krishna, he's running out of fear for Mother Yashoda.
Yeah, exactly. We'll start singing that soon. It's coming up a couple months.
Hare Krishna. You may have already answered this, but I'm still a bit confused. So they say that the soul is 10,000 of a hair. And I was trying to figure out if the soul is infinite and eternal, then how are we able to even know its size or like measure it?
So yeah, that's a great question. There's, in the 10th canto, there's a chapter near the end, called the Prayers of the Vedas Personified. And that chapter comes up because a question is asked to Shukadev Goswami. You know, like the Bhāgavatam is spoken, it's questions and answers between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev. And so Parikshit Maharaj is wondering, how is it possible to convey the absolute truth? How is it possible to talk about transcendental reality when you're using mundane language? And they basically, one boiled down answer is that because the absolute reality created everything, he also infused material language with the potency to be able to somewhat do that. And there's also kind of the realization in the heart. But nonetheless, the sages like Vyasadeva, he is considered a Shakti Avesh avatar. So if he's writing a Purana and he has some realization about the size of the soul and he writes like that, we can just kind of accept it. And it's not, the main meaning we should get out of it is that, okay, the soul is an infinitesimal, particle, and it's so powerful. Like you look at they actually only 1 pound of uranium atoms destroyed Nagasaki. Like that's, if you do the calculation for how much force was the nuclear explosion, they had about 60 pounds, but only 1 pound of that really did something. The other was just vaporized by the original explosion from the regular explosion. But the nuclear, so that only 1 pound of those atoms was able to like make a gigantic thing. But that's nothing compared to the power of the soul. As you get more subtle and subtle, something gets more and more powerful. So I was trying to make the point that although this measurement, we can kind of compare it to different modern day measurements, like 10 carbon atoms wide. But it's, in one sense, meaningless to do that comparison because there's no way that you can actually measure it with any material measuring device. Actually, even the word Maya means to measure. If you try to measure it, you can't. You can't measure the Supreme Lord. Like Mother Yashoda was trying to measure the Lord so she could put the rope around him. But it was always, no matter what she would measure, she would grab the rope, tie it, try to tie it, but it was always 2 fingers too short every time, no matter how much, because the Lord he's infinite, an infinite being that is like when this one Muni is experiencing the devastation, he like goes and he's seeing everything getting destroyed. Then he sees baby Krishna trying to eat something, and then he goes and then into his mouth, and then he's just in another universe again. Or Mother Yashoda is looking into his mouth, and she sees herself looking into his mouth. So it's like he's an infinite, inconceivable thing. So to try to measure that, it just like doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's just something the Vedas have said, not something that we can utilize for some sort of take advantage of it for some material way. Okay, now I know the soul is this big. I'm just gonna take you out of your body and put you on a computer chip or something like that. I don't know.
Well, the thing that crossed my mind was when you were like, okay, we can cut the body, but we can't cut the soul. And then so what I started to contemplate was like a knife cutting through and then seeing the atom split and then the soul just moving past it.
Yeah,
I don't know how to conceive it.
It's like this. The knife will try to cut, but the soul is not made of any material. So the way that a knife works is that there's some thin layer of material that's hard, that it's able to get through the molecules of the other softer material, and then it splits it in two. But it'll try to go on the soul, and the soul is just so subtle and so not non-material. Nothing. It'll just go right through it. There's nothing to it can't get into anything, dig into anything to actually start cutting.
Yeah, thank you for the class. I was appreciating the comment you made when you first read the verse about how it kind of doesn't make sense, the progress of the spiritual life, how one becomes situated in Brahman, like Brahman realization, one becomes situated in Brahman realization. In other words, one able to see, Pratyakshava Agamam Dharmyam, their soul, like who we are, as minute. And I think if we've all had experience of meditation, or that experience of perceiving yourself in a different way in trance. So how is it that one gets situated in trance and then eventually you're realizing your spiritual body? It seems like they're two different experiences. It's definitely hard to
there's two different practices. Like you talk about Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana Yoga, or the 6th chapter, Krishna goes into how you're sitting on a thing, you're doing meditation, and slowly you go closer and closer to Samadhi. I forget the exact steps. Dharana, Dhyana, then Samadhi. And these are all more deeper things. But for the devotee, we don't try that separately. It's mostly what we, sometimes that can come into being, like you hear about the acharyas. One time, one of the acharyas was stuck in their trance because they were trying to find a jewelry piece of one of the gopis, of Radharani, I think, and they couldn't find it, so they were refusing to do anything. And the devotees outside were worried that this devotee is going to die. So another one went into they did some asana, they did some sort of thing, and they went into the same trance, and they went into their to help them find the anklet or whatever it was. And so really, really advanced devotees kind of use this, but the bigger point is that they were bhakti yogis, because they had the main thing that we are able to meditate on. Krishna says, Prabhupada says, we chant the name, right? What should happen when you chant the name? That you start to remember Krishna's form, qualities, pastimes. But also Prabhupada says we don't force this. It's not something that, okay, I'm going to sit down and I have a list of the qualities and, okay, Hare Krishna, when I chant Hare Krishna, I'm going to remember the first one, and when I chant Hare Krishna the second time, I'm going to remember the second one, and I go through, and after one round, I've went through every single 64 qualities or something like that. It's not like that. It's that because when we're not chanting, that we engage in service, and that with that service, that gave us the adhikar to be able to hear from a sadhu, where Krishna is empowering that sadhu to speak to us, and he's empowering our heart to remember. Krishna says that all remembrance and forgiveness come from him. That shloka is not coming to my mind for some reason. Oh, Sarvashataham Hridisani Visto Mata Shmitir, Mata, coming from me, Shmitir, Gyanamaponam Cha, Vedishcha Saveraham Eva Vedog Vedanta Krid Vedavid Eva Chaham. So, by proper hearing, then Krishna will come into our heart and help us remember that. Then it'll come naturally. Prabhupada says just by the process of devotional service, then naturally Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes will all come. So it means we need to hear about Krishna. So we need to be reading about Krishna's pastimes, reading Krishna book, reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, reading Śrimad Bhāgavatam, reading Bhagavad Gita. That's also Krishna's pastimes. So then naturally we'll go through these stages of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Samadhi for the devotee is not some extraneous practice where they're trying to artificially and mechanically control their body. That can help to a certain degree, but in general, it's not recommended to really spend much effort in. What we should put our effort in is trying to serve and hear from sadhus. That's sangha. That will give us the power to actually start to remember. And then when we have so many good samskaras in our heart that everything else is driven out, then we can get past this to the stage of a shakti and bhava. So it's basically just increasing the amount of good samskaras and vasanas, and decreasing the bad samskaras and vasanas. And while simultaneously trying to please the Lord and please the devotees, so that by their Shakti, actually we can't do it alone by ourselves. By their Shakti, we can actually be empowered to do that.
I'd be interested to hear what Maharaj has to say about the relationship between the state of trance, which is almost impersonal in many ways. I mean, it's not impersonal, but it's having realization of yourself, right? And how that relates to becoming connected with the spiritual world as our goal in Bhakti Yoga. I don't understand that connection.
Well, trance doesn't necessarily mean to lose consciousness of everything, or to cease having specific consciousness of anything. That's one kind of trance, but there are other kinds of trances as well. So, trance is a experience. It has a sensory, particularly a body, kinesthetic sort of aspect, and it also may have a visual aspect. It may have other aspects. So, at least what I understand about trance, it's something that I never read anything very specific about. But we hear about devotees being in trance on, merging into the pastimes of Krishna. But we also hear about Ashtanga yogis being in trance by meditating on the Supersoul. And we hear about others being in trance by meditating on Brahman, So these are different types of trance. Trance is sort of a not so ordinary state of consciousness, essentially. And more than that, I really can't say.
And we've reached our time. Hari Om Tat Sat. Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Chandrasekhar Maharaj ki jai.